Chrystia Freeland's beliefs are absurd. You know it, I know it, and everyone knows it, which is why I've written a book called Kingdom of Cain. In it, I detail why Trudeau's beliefs and Freeland's beliefs and other progressive ideals are ridiculous, and then how to conquer those ideals. If you'd like to read it, it's available in the description below. I hope you enjoy it. With that, let's take a listen to what Freeland had to tell reporters yesterday.
Industrial policy in areas like net zero and semiconductors is closely tied to major Biden administration policy in the form of the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, and so on. What happens to all the billions that you've put up if a Trump administration comes in and decides to take a different tack or undo the Biden administration's climate and strategic technology policy?
Then I think we'll get even more investment in Canada.
Does anyone honestly believe that this Liberal government has cultivated a healthy ecosystem for investment? What nonsense. Investment likes certainty, and this government, this finance minister, is the epitome of uncertainty. No one knows what they're going to do tomorrow because they have proven themselves time and time again to be so unpredictable without any deference to the Constitution, for example, or the rule of law at all.
Our tax credits are a made in Canada policy, and they are designed to ensure that Canada takes advantage of this generational moment, right? Like, you know very well, you write about this all the time. The transformation that the global economy is going through right now is comparable only to the Industrial Revolution itself.
Oh, you mean like the fourth Industrial Revolution? Like what your leader Klaus Schwab calls it? Which is, of course, communism. The WEF is talking about a new capitalism. It's not capitalism. It's complete state ownership. It's reprehensible, and it has to be resisted at all cost.
We believe it is absolutely essential that Canada gets its share of the global pie. Actually, we think we should get more than our share of the global pie. And the good news is we have all of the ingredients for a real industrial renaissance in Canada. We have the critical minerals and metals that the new industry of the world needs. We have clean electricity. Canada's grid is already 85% clean, and those tax credits I spoke about are built to allow us to increase our clean power generation because we know we're going to need that.
If this doesn't terrify you, it should. If this doesn't make you scared about what this government is trying to do, wake up, smell the roses, smell the flowers, smell the rotting fruit of the federal government because it is putrid. The Industrial Revolution that they're talking about, again, is utter communism. This language of clean electricity is vile, precisely because, in her speech, Freeland is insinuating that we prairie individuals, we who live in Western Canada, who would dare burn oil and gas, who would dare burn coal to provide electricity, which, believe it or not, we need when it's minus 50, are exhausting, dirty, poisonous, dangerous, unclean pollutants into the atmosphere, as if it's wrong for us to heat our homes, is a diabolical insinuation. What are we going to do here in Alberta? Use hydropower with all of the massive oceans and lakes and waterfalls that we have? Is that what we're going to do? That's how we're going to generate power? Perhaps we should use wind, which was generating, 3 megawatts of power when it was minus 50 one morning? That's what we're going to do? It's absolutely absurd. It is not immoral to burn oil and gas. It is not immoral to burn coal. It's not immoral to burn other hydrocarbons, especially with the excellent scrubbers that now exist to produce electricity to heat our homes. To take that away from us is demonstrably evil.
We are a country that knows how to manufacture. You know, there are other countries that let go of their industrial base. Canada has never done that. having industry in Canada is serving us in very good stead.
Especially if you live in the East. Ottawa caters to the East. Again, this is not a diatribe against Easterners who are working. Of course not. They would be foolish to not enjoy the benefits that the federal government affords. But how can Freeland claim to be a champion of industry as she and her government actively try to destroy, for example, the oil and gas industry in the nation? Hypocrite.
As Francois Philippe just said, and Sean talking about our great universities, we have the most educated people in the OECD.
They
And
certainly aren't in government, though. And if they are, it's because the new term educated is synonymous with indoctrinated. It used to be that we had thinkers in this country, in all countries, and those thinkers were those individuals who thought. Now, the new thinkers of the modern age, like Freeland, are those who do not think. We've confused intellect with obedience. That is, if you go to school and perfectly obey the radical ideologues who teach there, you receive high marks on your essays and your tests, and therefore society calls you smart. In reality, all you are is obedient, and obedient to something which does not deserve obedience.
We come to these press conferences and we always hear you say that the housing issue is a supply issue. I'll note that you haven't said that today, and your government's made recent changes with international students. Is that a signal from you and the government that there's a recognition that there needs to be a conversation or issues dealt with the demand side to get house prices back down?
That's a good question, because there is a demand side problem with the housing market. Demand needs to decrease substantially if we want to return housing prices to normal.
That's a very smart and thoughtful question. No, it is. And, the actions that Mark announced last week were really important. And I think they've been recognized as the right thing for Canada to do. And maybe Mark will want to add something in a minute because I'm about to quote him and he can speak for himself. But what Mark said and what our government believes is the system for international students was being abused. That was not serving the international students who we want to welcome to Canada, and we want them to have a good experience here.
This has nothing to do with housing. What a ridiculous answer.
It is now time for provinces to pull up their socks. I do also want to say our government, and I think the vast majority of Canadians, continue to recognize that Canada's diversity is our strength.
Wrong. That is so wrong. I talk about that briefly in this book. It is utter nonsense to assume that diversity is strength. When in the whole of history has that ever been true? When has absolute diversity ever strengthened a country? It doesn't do that. It never has done that. Instead, it completely tears the country apart. When you have a team of horses pulling a plow, you have to hitch them up in the same direction. If instead you hitch up one horse going north and one horse going south and one going east and one going west, you will find that they get absolutely nowhere because they're all pulling in different directions. In the same way, when we have this soup of diversity where everyone's belief is equally valid and everyone's truth is equally truthful, the country stalls. The country's destroyed because everyone is being pulled in different directions or is pulling in different directions. More than that, Freeland's belief that diversity is our strength is itself not a diverse opinion. Because if you know it isn't, Freeland is going to say, yes, it is. And all you have to do is ask her, how can you say that? How can you answer that? How can that be your reply? That's not being very diverse. That's not taking into account my beliefs and my opinions. And finally, history proves that there will be one belief which dominates. There will be one belief, right or wrong, which rises up and demands obedience. So Freeland can talk about diversity all she wants. In truth, there will be a belief that structures itself to be supreme in Canada, and it will not tolerate diversity.
that immigration is a strength for Canada, and the ability to welcome immigrants is a strength for Canada.
Again, not a moral statement. Like, where is that morally in the scriptures? It's not. That's not a moral statement. It's one thing to invite a stranger to your home. It's another thing entirely to invite strangers to someone else's home. That's exactly what Freeland is doing. And the Liberal government is doing.
We need to be sure that we do it properly and that loopholes in the system are not being abused. And when we see those loopholes, that we act to close them. And on housing, we do believe the core objective, and you just heard Sean today talking about more supply measures. The FES implementation bill that is before the House has more supply measures directed at co-ops. So don't get us wrong, Mackenzie. Our core thing on housing is supply, supply, supply. We now have, is it 31 Housing Accelerator Fund agreements?
Changing every day.
Yeah. We have agreements across the country with municipalities to remove restrictions and make it possible to build more. And we know
this policy is a disaster. You cannot build a house in a moment. It takes longer than a day or 5 days to build a home, unless you're talking about the tiny homes, literally they're called tiny homes, probably the size of my office, that Trudeau wants to build. This is so absurd. I've used the bathtub analogy before. Right now, with regards to the housing market, it's like a bathtub that's overfilling. A rational man would turn off the taps first, but because it's our government, they're not rational. And so instead of turning off the taps, that is stopping the supply or the demand for new homes, they instead choose to build up the tub, create more supply. But of course, that takes time. And by the time you're finished building up your tub, if you don't turn off the taps, you're going to find that the floor and presumably the basement beneath it is ruined.
we have to build more homes faster. There are now more than 500,000 young Canadians who have opened tax-free first home savings accounts. That's like people voting with their feet, voting with their money, putting their money in a bank account and saying, I want to buy a house. Those are really important, optimistic people. I say they're young because by definition, you have to be buying your first home. We want to support them. And so we know we need to build homes that they can buy and have more rental supply for people. Mark, I quoted you. Do you want to now quote yourself?
I'm trying to reduce the red tape, so I'll try not to quote myself.
Let's take a look. That is, let's take a look at these homes. Here's from Jordan Peterson's Twitter. Beautiful. Wow. What an oasis. Incredible. Love what the Liberal government is doing to this country. Excellent.
Generous, self-sacrificing guy is.
So if you don't mind, guys, maybe just I'll just take maybe one question, no follow-up, so more people can have a question. Mia Rapson, CP.
You mentioned the childcare agreements several times today as a positive thing and something that's working well. But we know that there's lots of daycares in provinces that are saying they don't have enough funding and they either have to pull out, or one of them I think is even threatening to have sort of rolling closures. Is your government able or willing to put more money on the table to make this work, or do you expect the provinces to put up more money to make this work?
It's not the government who puts up money. It's not the provinces. It's not the federal government. It's you. It's me. It's Canadians who put up money. The federal government decides how to use that money. And, as is so evident, they are using it wrong.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We are very focused on early learning and childcare.
Oh, they certainly are. I have no doubt Freeland is telling the truth about that. This government does everything they can, just like most other governments, to be entirely honest, to brainwash children and to indoctrinate children with the sickening views of big government, worship big government. We need big government. We have to depend on big government. We have to rely on Trudeau's government. Without them, who would our Messiah be? I have no doubt that Freeland and her government are focused on early learning and childcare. All the more reason to see that they are removed from it.
We think this is a policy that checks all the boxes.
What boxes? Daycare shortages? That's a box that's being checked.
It is something that helps affordability for families. A lot of families have talked about daycare fees before our program as a second mortgage. It is helping families get through. It is a policy that is supporting the economy on the supply side. And thanks in part to that policy, Canada has, the highest level ever of prime age women's labor force participation. And those women who are now back in the workforce are, by the way, women who already had a home in Canada. So it is a really important and powerful supply side measure. And
This talk of economics here is pure Keynesian garbage. That is such nonsense that the government has to spend and has to subsidize in order to get the economy moving. That is complete and utter nonsense, precisely because the government first has to take from individuals in order to spend anywhere. And finally, Freeland's thought here that it's some sort of virtue to see more and more, what did she call them, prime age women working in the workplace is, again, utter nonsense. Why is it that a woman working for a boss in a little office, a little gray office without windows, is to be cherished above raising children in the home? That's wrong. There is nothing more venerated. There is nothing more sacred. There is nothing more important than a mother raising her children. That is the highest calling. It's the highest career, says C.S. Lewis, for all other careers exist to serve the ultimate career. In that, he's talking about the homemaker. This government is completely inverted in its values. It's completely inverted in its understanding of reality. And it's wrong. And it's easy to become discouraged. It's easy to say, what are we going to do? Look at how powerful this government is. Look at all that this government does. But as a Christian, there's no reason to be discouraged. I know that Christ is returning. I know that Christ has all things in his hand. I know that he's going to judge the nations. I know that he's going to judge these leaders who right now are driving this country and so many other countries like it deeper and deeper and deeper into a terrible ground. So, although right now might seem discouraging, we have no reason to fear. We have no reason to worry, at least those of us who are Christians. Christ is coming back. And he's not coming back as a babe in a manger. No, he's coming back as a white rider with a golden sash around his chest, armed with a beautiful scepter, and riding in from heaven on a horse. Once again, if you'd like to read my new book, Kingdom of Cain, it's out, it's available, it's in the description below. In it, I talk about socialism. I talk about morality. I talk about law. I talk about what Freeland is trying to do and what Trudeau is trying to do, and the one who can save us from the Liberal government's empire.